The Salker fleet arrived in Earth's orbit, without warning, their ships appearing like dark shadows against the bright backdrop of the sun from the distance. They seemed like little more than specks of dust, but to the inhabitants of Earth, they were giants. They had traveled for thousands of years from a distant galaxy, with one goal in mind: to conquer and claim another planet for their ever-expanding empire. The Salker had watched Earth for centuries, monitoring the planet's progress through their advanced sensors, observing the growth of human civilization, the rise of technology, and the spread of conflict. They had decided that Earth was ripe for conquest. They saw humanity as nothing more than a fractured species, struggling to unite a race of primitives. They believed their advanced technology would easily overwhelm any resistance. As their massive warships entered Earth's atmosphere, the aliens remained confident their weapons were designed to crush entire cities in a single strike, and the human armies were nothing more than ants in comparison. The first wave of attacks were swift and brutal. High-energy beams cut through buildings and military installations as if they were made of paper. Panic spread across the world's nations. Governments scrambled to respond, but it was clear they were outmatched. In the chaos, something unexpected happened in the heart of New York City as the first alien bombardment struck. The streets were filled with screams and destruction, but then something else rose from the smoke and debris. Small pockets of resistance began to form. Scattered groups of survivors huddled together and found strength in numbers. Armed with whatever they could find, makeshift weapons and old military gear, they fought back against the invaders. A sense of unity began to spread as the realization hit home: humanity was facing extinction. Yet they were still fighting. They were far from powerless. The Salker had expected fear and submission, but instead they found defiance and courage. In the midst of this chaos, a brilliant mind emerged. Leader Eva Chen, a scientist working at a university in Beijing. She had been studying alien technology for years, not out of curiosity, but out of fear. She had always known that one day humanity might face a threat like this. She had gathered a team of engineers and researchers to investigate alien artifacts that had been discovered over the years, and through their work they had uncovered a disturbing truth: the Salker's technology, while advanced, had weaknesses, and those weaknesses could be exploited if they could only find a way to access it. Dr. Chen quickly understood that the key to humanity's survival was not in matching the Salker's firepower, but in understanding their technology. She began devising a plan to reverse engineer the alien shields and weapons. It was a long shot, but she knew if they succeeded, even the smallest breakthrough could turn the tide of the war. Meanwhile, across the globe, the fight was intensifying. Human forces began to organize resistance. Fighters from different nations came together: soldiers, civilians, engineers, doctors. All were united in their goal to drive the invaders off their planet. The Salker, however, remained oblivious to the growing human resistance. They had assumed victory was inevitable. Their technology had never failed them before. They had never encountered a species that fought back with such resilience or such heart. As the first wave of alien forces pushed deeper into the heart of Earth's largest cities, one thing became clear to the Salker: humanity would not go down without a fight, and the fight had only just begun. As the initial shock of the invasion began to settle in, humanity was forced to adapt and fight back against an enemy they could hardly understand. The Salker were everywhere. Their ships were overhead, their weapons destructive and precise. Yet the very thing the invaders had underestimated began to show itself. With each passing day, human ingenuity began to surface in unexpected ways. Eva Chen's team worked around the clock, gathering every scrap of alien technology they could find in order to study it. Their efforts were frantic and desperate, but as the days passed, they began to piece together the puzzle. The alien shields, which had seemed impenetrable, were not flawless. They had a key vulnerability, a frequency that could destabilize the protective barrier. If only they could find the right method to exploit it. The breakthrough was small, but it was the first step towards an answer to the Salker's dominance. Meanwhile, across the world, the resistance movement was growing stronger. Each day, more and more civilians were joining the fight, from former soldiers to teachers, from scientists to farmers. People with no military training were stepping forward to defend their homes. One such group, led by a former military commander named Marcus Sullivan, became one of the first to organize a successful counteroffensive in South America. Their operation involved hijacking an alien supply convoy, using nothing more than guerrilla tactics, and their knowledge of the terrain. They hit hard and fast, before disappearing into the jungle, leaving the Xalker baffled and confused. The small victory ignited hope across the globe, and soon resistance groups were coordinating in ways never seen before. National borders became less important as people banded together to form a united front. The enemy might have the technology, but humanity had something more powerful. They had each other, and they had determination. Even in the hardest-hit cities, those who had survived the initial onslaught began to rebuild and fight back. People who had lost everything began organizing local militias and scavenging whatever weapons they could find. Military installations were abandoned, but the human spirit was not broken. In underground bunkers, scientists and engineers were tirelessly working to find new ways to challenge the Xalker's dominance. The Xalker, however, were growing increasingly frustrated. Their attempts to crush humanity were met with increasing resistance, and they were starting to recognize something they had failed to see before. The humans they faced were not the weak-minded creatures they had assumed. They were clever, resourceful, and relentless. They adapted to every situation and found ways to turn the tables on their invaders in ways the Xalker had not anticipated. Frustration spread among the Xalker commanders. Some of them even began to question their initial assumptions about humanity. Maybe they had been too confident, too dismissive. Perhaps the humans were more dangerous than they had ever imagined. Durchen's team finally succeeded in perfecting a prototype of the frequency device that could disrupt the alien shield. She understood that this would be humanity's first real opportunity to strike back. But the stakes were higher than ever before. If they failed, it would mean the end of the war before it had truly begun. But if they succeeded, it could change the course of history. As the resistance prepared for their next major offensive, they knew one thing for certain: they had nothing left to lose, but they also had everything to gain. And the Xalker were about to learn the most important lesson of all. They had never faced an enemy quite like humanity. The battle was coming, and this time the Xalker would not have the upper hand. The day of the first major human counterattack arrived, and with it, an air of determination unlike anything seen before. Humanity's forces were ready to make their move, armed with the prototype frequency disruptor designed by Dr. Chen's team, and a collection of improvised weapons and tech gathered from every corner of the world. The resistance was about to show the Xalker that humanity could fight back. Marcus Sullivan's team had gathered a small but formidable group of fighters, from veterans of past wars to civilians with no military experience, but an unshakable will to protect their homes. Together, they planned an audacious strike on a major Xalker energy facility located just outside of Buenos Aires. The facility was vital to the alien invaders' operations. It powered their weapons, shields, and communications, and if it could be taken out, the enemy would lose a critical part of their strategic advantage. The resistance fighters knew it was a long shot. They would be outnumbered, outgunned, and facing advanced technology that could wipe them out in an instant, but they had the one thing the Xalker had failed to account for: the ability to think outside the box. The plan was simple: infiltrate the facility, plant the frequency disruptor, and destroy everything that powered the alien war machines. Once it was activated, the Xalker's shields would falter, leaving their forces vulnerable to a second wave of attacks, a calculated gamble that could either result in victory or annihilation. The night before the attack, Sullivan gathered his team around a makeshift map in an abandoned warehouse, their faces illuminated by the dim light of a single overhead bulb. "This isn't just about us," he said, his voice steady, but filled with an urgency that hadn't been there before. "This is about every single person on this planet. If we don't take this chance, we lose everything. So we fight, and we fight like there's no tomorrow, because there might not be." The next morning, under the cover of darkness, they set their plan into motion, moving swiftly and quietly through the overgrown forests surrounding the facility. As they approached the Xalker compound, their hearts raced, But there was no time for fear. They had a job to do, and failure wasn't an option. Using guerrilla tactics, they snuck past the first few alien patrols, evading detection with stealth and a deep understanding of their environment. Their movements were fluid, instinctual, driven by a desperation to succeed. Once inside the facility, Dr. Chen's frequency disruptor was set up at the heart of the energy core, a glowing structure of alien design. The device, small but incredibly powerful, would emit a pulse that would weaken the alien shields enough to allow human fighters to breach the perimeter. Marcus stood over the device, his hands trembling slightly as he activated it, his mind racing as he thought of the risks ahead if the device malfunctioned or the timing was off. The whole plan could fail. But in that moment he trusted the team and the intelligence they had gathered. He trusted humanity's unbreakable resolve. "On my mark," Marcus whispered into his communicator, his voice steady despite the fear that threatened to surge within him. "We hit them hard. No hesitation." With a sudden, calculated strike, the facility was hit by a barrage of human-made explosives. As the pulse from the disruptor surged outward, the alien shields flickered and collapsed for a split second, a moment of vulnerability that would change everything. Human fighters stormed the compound, overwhelming the surprised Xalker defenders as the disruptor's pulse continued to tear through their technology. The first wave of humans had broken through. And as they advanced, they realized something the Xalker had never expected. Humanity could win this fight, not through brute force, but through the brilliance of their will and their unity. The battle had begun, but it was far from over. The Xalker were learning quickly that their overconfidence would be their undoing. The Xalker were caught off guard, reeling from the unexpected strike. Their once impenetrable shields had faltered, leaving their defenses wide open. The first wave of human fighters, bolstered by the successful deployment of the disruptor, surged forward with renewed strength. The Resistance's initial success was a shockwave that reverberated across the battlefield, stirring hope in places that had long since given up. For the first time since the invasion, humanity had a real fighting chance. Marcus Sullivan led the charge, his team of Resistance fighters moving through the alien compound with relentless precision. The Xalker forces scrambled to regain control, but the disruption had taken them by surprise. Their weaponry was far superior in design, but their reliance on technology had become their fatal flaw. They had never expected humanity to strike so quickly, so decisively. As the facility began to crumble under the assault, soldiers planted explosives and sabotaged alien machinery, ensuring that even if they were driven back, the Xalker would be left with nothing. Each explosion sent shockwaves through the compound, signaling that humanity wasn't just fighting back. They were actively dismantling the Xalker's hold on Earth. Meanwhile, in the heart of the battle, Dr. Chen and her team were working tirelessly to refine the disruptor. They had already seen what it could do, but they knew it needed to be perfected if they hoped to continue their advances. The Xalker might have technology beyond their wildest imaginations, but they had something even more powerful, a drive to survive, to protect what was theirs, and the ingenuity to adapt in real time. The human spirit was not easily broken. It was something the Xalker were beginning to understand as their forces started to retreat. Resistance fighters flooded in from multiple directions, cutting off escape routes, overwhelming alien positions with a combination of sheer numbers and tactical genius. Soldiers who had never fought together before now worked as one, each person a piece of a well-oiled machine that refused to fail. But the Xalker were not without their own countermeasures. As they retreated, they activated an emergency protocol, calling in reinforcements from orbit. The skies darkened as more Xalker warships descended toward the battlefield, their cannons primed and ready to bring destruction from above. The battle for Earth was far from over, and the humans knew they would need more than just courage and resourcefulness to stand a chance against the full might of the alien fleet. In the midst of this chaos, something unexpected happened. The Resistance, already shaken from the loss of comrades and the brutality of the alien forces, found strength in a shared cause. What had started as a desperate fight for survival had now evolved into a crusade. Civilians, people who had been ordinary citizens just days before, now carried weapons and held their ground against alien invaders. Entire neighborhoods transformed into makeshift fortresses, united not only by a desire to defend their homes, but by the realization that they had more power than they ever believed. The Xalker, however, were beginning to realize the true scale of their miscalculation. They had underestimated humanity's ability to adapt, to learn, and to fight back against impossible odds. And as the first waves of their reinforcements hit the ground, the aliens saw something they hadn't seen before: a unified planet, willing to fight until the last person stood. Humanity wasn't just surviving. They were evolving, and the Xalker were starting to fear that they might not win this war after all. As the Xalker reinforcements continued to descend upon the battlefield, the skies above Earth darkened with the threat of annihilation. The human resistance, emboldened by their previous success, knew they had only one chance to secure victory. They couldn't afford to fall back, not now when they were so close to turning the tide. Every minute that passed was a minute of precious time they couldn't waste. The war had escalated from mere survival to a full-fledged battle for the planet, and humanity had no intention of giving up. Marcus Sullivan and his team had been at the heart of the first wave, but now, with new reinforcements flooding in from every corner of the world, they were part of something much larger, a planetary movement, not just a ragtag resistance. Civilians who had once been terrified and powerless were now combatants, each one holding their ground with a fierce determination. Soldiers, farmers, doctors, students, all were united in their goal to drive the Xalker back into the void. The Xalker, however, were quickly learning the full extent of humanity's tenacity. Despite the superior technology at their disposal, the aliens were not prepared for a war of attrition, a prolonged fight in which the heart and soul of the human race would be tested. Their strategy of overwhelming force was beginning to falter. The more they pushed, the more they encountered human ingenuity and resolve. The aliens' tactics, though effective in short bursts, couldn't match the sheer unpredictability of humanity's tactics. Dr. Chen and her team had continued refining the disruptor, now working on a larger, more powerful version that could affect a broader range of Xalker technology. The original model had been a success in taking down shields, but the aliens had adapted. Shields were now fluctuating between full activation and rapid regeneration, meaning the disruptor would need a more sustained effect. This new model, if successful, could permanently disable the enemy's fleet, ensuring the Xalker's final defeat. With a prototype in hand, Dr. Chen briefed Marcus and the command leaders on the next phase of their strategy. They would infiltrate a key Xalker base located deep within an urban center. The mission was risky, even by their standards. Taking out this base would cut off the alien force's ability to regroup and deploy reinforcements, crippling their command and control. The plan was simple, but it was also reckless. Strike fast, hit hard, and disable the alien communication grid before they could retaliate. It would take every ounce of human coordination, every drop of courage. But the risk was worth it. If they succeeded, the Xalker would be left with no ability to fight back in any organized way. That night, as Marcus and his team prepared for the assault, the sense of unity that had formed between the resistance fighters was palpable. They knew the odds were stacked against them, but for the first time, the stakes were clear. The future of Earth rested on their shoulders, and they were ready to give everything they had to protect it. When they stormed the Xalker base, their strategy was executed with brutal precision. Using stealth, diversion, and the human ability to adapt on the fly, the resistance breached the facility's defenses. Explosions rocked the area, and the alien forces scrambled to respond. But they were no match for the well-coordinated assault. As the disruptor activated, a surge of power crackled through the air. The Xalker shields began to falter once more, their technology trembling under the assault. It was working. For the first time, humanity's weapon had the Xalker on the back foot. Marcus stood in the heart of the chaos, watching as the Xalker's lines began to break, their systems failing. The enemy was reeling. And in that moment, humanity was closer than ever to victory. As the Salkir's shield systems failed and their command structure began to fracture, the Resistance saw an opening, a rare moment where the tide of battle might actually turn in humanity's favor. The aliens had underestimated Earth's ability to adapt, and now the cracks in their once imposing superiority were growing wider with every passing minute. The disruption caused by Dr. Chen's prototype had caused widespread chaos in the Salkir's defense network. Their advanced weaponry, which had once seemed indestructible, now seemed fragile under human hands. The battle for Earth was entering a new phase, one where the humans had regained momentum and were ready to push forward, not just as defenders, but as conquerors of their own destiny. Every victory, no matter how small, emboldened the human spirit. The survivors who had once hidden in the shadows now fought with an unrelenting drive to win. Their losses had been immense, but with every step forward, they proved their resilience, their refusal to give in. Marcus Sullivan and his team had taken part in the attack on the Salkir base, but as the mission ended in a resounding success, they knew this was only the beginning. The Resistance now had the confidence to take on larger, more strategic targets, Salkir supply depots, energy hubs, and even their remaining orbital stations. The balance had shifted. The humans were no longer on the defensive. They were on the offensive, striking at the heart of the alien forces. As cities around the world became battlegrounds, with military forces joining the civilian resistance in coordinated strikes, a global effort to reclaim Earth began to form. In every corner of the planet, people were rising to the occasion. There were no more divisions, no more political borders. There was only one cause, one purpose: to reclaim their home. The Salkir's once dominant fleets now faced a planet that had united in ways that no one had thought possible. Dr. Chen's work wasn't over. Her team had managed to refine the disruptor into a more potent weapon, one capable of disabling entire fleets of Salkir warships. The time had come for humanity's greatest strike. With the enemy fleet weakened and disoriented, humanity was ready to hit them where it hurt most, in the heart of their operations. The final blow was within reach. As the Resistance prepared for their most dangerous mission yet, they knew they would face the Salkir's full wrath. The alien forces had regrouped, and the few remaining warships had been fortified. But the humans had a new advantage: unity, and a sense of purpose that could not be shaken. They had lost so much already, but they had gained something far more powerful: a belief in themselves. The final assault would involve a direct strike on the alien mothership, a colossal vessel that had been controlling the Salkir's operations across Earth. It was the nerve center of the entire invasion, and taking it down would cripple the enemy once and for all. The human resistance had learned their enemy's weaknesses, and now they had one last chance to put everything on the line and end the war. Marcus and his team were part of the first wave, chosen for their experience and their willingness to fight until the very end. The plan was simple: infiltrate the mothership, plant the disruptor at its core, and escape before the alien forces could retaliate. Failure wasn't an option. Earth's survival depended on them. As they set their sights on the mothership, the Resistance was more determined than ever. The Salkir had made the mistake of underestimating humanity, and now they would pay the price for it. The final battle for Earth had begun, and humanity was ready to win. The time had come. The Resistance forces, now fully coordinated across the globe, were preparing for the most dangerous mission humanity had ever faced. The Salkir mothership, the center of the alien operation, loomed in Earth's orbit like a dark shadow, its towering presence a reminder of the devastation the invaders had wrought. It was the final obstacle standing between humanity and their survival. If they could take down the mothership, the Salkir's invasion would crumble, and Earth would be free. Marcus Sullivan and his team were among the first to board the human fleet, a ragtag collection of ships that had been converted into makeshift war vessels over the past weeks. They weren't sleek or technologically advanced like the Salkir ships, but they had something far more valuable: humanity's ingenuity. Armed with a series of powerful disruptors, explosives, and a coordinated attack strategy, the human fighters were ready to strike at the heart of the alien operation. The plan was simple, too simple, almost. Infiltrate the mothership's defensive perimeter, disable the alien technology keeping their shields up, and plant the disruptor at the heart of their command center. Once it was activated, the mothership's entire systems would collapse. But getting there wouldn't be easy. The Xalkur weren't about to give up their most prized weapon without a fight. The final assault would be a race against time, where every second counted. As Marcus's ship broke through the atmosphere and into space, he could feel the weight of the mission settling in. His heart pounded, and he took a deep breath. This wasn't just about him or his team anymore. This was about the future of every single human being left on Earth. This was their last chance. The first wave of resistance ships had already begun their approach to the mothership, drawing fire from the Xalkur's orbital defenses. Anti-aircraft fire lit up the sky, and explosions rocked the area as Xalkur warships began to engage the resistance fighters. But the humans pressed on, using every maneuver they had learned from the alien ship's tactics to outwit their attackers. Marcus's heart raced as he watched a nearby fighter explode in a fiery blaze. The stakes had never been higher, and each moment seemed to stretch into eternity. But they couldn't stop. They had come too far, lost too much, to turn back now. They were fighting for Earth. They were fighting for humanity's survival. The Xalkur mothership was massive, its dark, foreboding shape hanging in space like a spider's web waiting to trap them. It was surrounded by a powerful defensive perimeter of smaller ships, all of which seemed to be on high alert. The resistance had to break through that first if they were to have any hope of reaching the heart of the mothership. Marcus signaled to his team, and they moved in. With a combination of precision and speed, they dodged the enemy fire and began picking off the Xalkur ships one by one. Each explosion was a victory, but the real prize lay ahead. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, they reached the mothership's docking bay. The resistance ships circled the massive vessel as a few daring souls, including Marcus, prepared to board. Their mission was clear: get inside, sabotage the alien systems, and plant the disruptor deep within the mothership's core. As Marcus and his team made their way toward the mothership's hull, the full scale of the invasion became clear. They were no longer fighting for survival. They were fighting for a future, one where humanity would stand tall again, free from the tyranny of an alien empire that had underestimated them. The final battle was about to begin, and it would be the fight to end all fights. With every step forward, the humans felt the weight of their ancestors, their resilience, their capacity to adapt, and knew they would not let it be in vain. This was humanity's moment to prove that no force, no matter how mighty, could ever conquer their will. The final battle had arrived. The tension was palpable as Marcus Sullivan and his team moved swiftly through the docking bay of the Xalkur mothership. Their hearts pounded, adrenaline coursing through their veins. The ship was a fortress, its cold metal walls humming with alien energy. Every corner, every hallway felt like a maze, designed to thwart any intruder. But for the resistance fighters, there was no turning back. They had come too far. As they advanced deeper into the mothership, the sound of clashing explosions reverberated from the outer hull, where the remaining resistance ships were holding off the Xalkur fleet. Their sacrifice was not in vain. Every minute they bought humanity was another chance at victory. But Marcus couldn't afford to think about that now. He had one mission: get to the core of the ship and plant the disruptor. The further they went, the more resistance they encountered. Xalkur soldiers, who had been trained for centuries to protect their empire, met the human fighters with relentless precision. Yet the humans were quick, resourceful, and unified in their purpose. Each skirmish was a brutal exchange, but humanity's resolve was stronger than any weapon the Xalkur had. For every alien soldier that fell, another human soldier took their place, refusing to yield. Finally, they'd reached the central command room, A massive open chamber filled with rows of alien consoles, each one flickering with data and communication streams. At the center of the room stood the heart of the mothership, a colossal energy core, glowing with a menacing light. This was it. The disruptor had to be placed here, at the core, to send out a signal that would cripple the entire fleet. Marcus signaled to his team, and they moved in, planting explosives along key pathways and setting the disruptor in place. But just as they were about to activate it, a low growl echoed through the chamber. The Xalkur leader, a towering figure in dark armor, stepped forward from the shadows. His eyes glowed with an eerie blue light, and his voice rumbled as he addressed the humans. "You think you can stop us?" he sneered, his voice cold and calculating. "We are the Xalkur. We have conquered hundreds of worlds. You are nothing." Marcus stepped forward, meeting the alien's gaze. "You underestimated us," he said, his voice steady despite the tension in the air. "You thought we were just a fractured species, but we fight together, and that's something you'll never understand." The Xalkur leader let out a harsh laugh, his soldiers closing in from all sides. The room grew tense as the final confrontation loomed. Marcus knew that if they didn't act now, they'd be trapped. Without hesitation, he signaled his team to engage. Gunfire erupted as the resistance fought with everything they had. For a few moments, it seemed like the odds were too great, but the humans were not backing down. They fought with a ferocity that came from the very core of their beings, their love for their planet, their people, their future. In the chaos, Marcus reached the disruptor and activated it. A bright pulse of energy shot through the room, sending a shockwave across the ship. The alien systems began to fail, the once invincible mothership shaking violently as the disruptor did its job. The Xalkur leader staggered, his eyes widening in realization. You'll regret this," he gasped, but it was too late. The disruptor had sent a powerful pulse that disabled the ship's systems, and as the mothership began to collapse in on itself, the remaining Xalkur forces scattered in panic. With the heart of their operation destroyed, the alien empire's grip on Earth was broken. As the ship began to implode, Marcus and his team raced toward their escape pods. The countdown had begun. Earth was free. Humanity had won. The invaders were no more. Minutes later, as they soared back to the surface, Marcus gazed out at the distant, crumbling wreckage of the mothership, a smile tugging at the corner of his lips. They had done it. The fight had been long, and the cost had been great, but Earth was theirs again. Humanity had faced extinction and had risen from the ashes. They had shown the Xalkur one undeniable truth: never underestimate the will of humanity. The future was theirs to shape.